Hello relatives. So this is Mackenzie and I'm going to be doing Zentangle today. And I've got my cat here, which is why my camera is so shaky. This is my baby girl Hella. She's probably going to be joining us a lot. She wants a lot of attention right now. So we'll see how this goes. Alright. So I'm just prepping my paper here. I usually take these out of sketchbooks. So this is my paper. Today, I would recommend, if you have them, a sticky notes and a ruler. We're going to be setting up a design that's going to be working with diamonds, so it's easier if you have a ruler and a sticky note. If you don't have those, it's fine. You can try and do this freehand, or you can do a simplified version of just doing regular squares, but I find it's easier if you have a starting place. So I'm going to take my sticky note here. And this is mostly just going to be a guide. Right? So there are what are basically going to be my guidelines. So I'm just trying to line up the top and bottom so that they are aligned properly. Now from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ruler. My cats are all over the place. Okay, so my sticky note is 3 inches by 3 inches. I'm just going to take my ruler. I'm going to line it up alongside. All of my cats are joining us today, just so you know. They're going to be wandering everywhere. And from there, I'm going to take a marker. Right? So I'm lining up my ruler so it is parallel to my sticky note. I'm going to scoot it over just a bit so that my marker can squeeze in there a little bit easier. I'm actually going to start with my pencil because I do want this to turn out to be a diamond shape, so I don't want any stragglers at the edge. So I'm just going to draw a line here. And now I'm going to go and do one on the other side of this sticky note. So from here, you can move the sticky note, or you can use your existing lines as guide wires. Both are completely workable options. I'm just going to re-stick my sticky note, and I'm going to draw a second set of lines up here. It's okay if there's lines going all over the place. We've got an eraser. We'll take care of those later. For now, we're just putting down some lines to help us guide out where we want things to go. Okay. So I'm looking to get between 6 and 7 squares out of this. So I've got 1 so far, right? And I can always place my sticky note back down in its original position. And then I'll build up on this side too. So take my sticky note, I'm going to follow this line. And again, if this looks too hard, feel free to just do squares. I'm basically doing squares, I'm just doing them against the existing paper lines. And I'm just looking to get about 6 squares. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll probably do 1 here and 1 here. So I'll take my sticky note, I'm going to place it up in this corner. And I don't even need a ruler for this, I can just follow the existing line of the sticky note. Then I'm going to do the same thing over here. My cats are all over the place today. Alright, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now that I've got my squares, I'm going to take my marker and I'm going to go over these lines again. And I'm not going to go over these little tail ends that are everywhere. I'm just going to go over the main set of lines so that I get a really nice sharp section going. As you can see, I'm definitely not turning out perfect lines. They're not going exactly on top of the pencil lines. Some of them are even missing them altogether. But I am getting the kind of shape that I want, which is just really bold lines going all the way around my sections. But Zentangle's not about being perfect. It's just about having fun and to take some time to relax. You know, just a little introspection. So now I've got my 6 squares. Got a 4 section, and then I got 2 little tail ends. Alright, and so in these squares, I'm going to be doing one design a piece. We've done this a couple months ago, and you really don't need to set it up like this if you don't want to. You can just grab a piece of paper and fill up any kind of section with this design. I just really wanted to do squares today, or diamonds. And so for this first design, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my marker, and I'm going to use this bottom square here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at one corner, and I'm going to create a rounded line going from one edge to the other. And I'm going to continue making a rounded line, just following on kind of like a rainbow. And this is going to be the setup because we're going to be doing a little bit of coloring. Alright, so for this pattern, I'm going to be doing some coloring, so I'm going to grab some markers. I'm going to grab some pinks. Let's see here, a yellow, because I like this yellow. Probably an orange. My Sharpies are weird because I really like using red and rainbow designs, but these Sharpies, the red and the orange look so similar that I usually only choose to do one or the other, which is why I have 2 different pinks here, an orange, a yellow, kind of a lime green, a mint green, an aqua, and then a purple. So you can see those colors like that. So those are the colors that I'm going to be doing. It really doesn't matter how many colors you have. I chose to do a lot of colors because I'm going to be filling in pretty much all of this space. So I'm going to start with my first color, and I'm going to start going from the pinks down to the purples, just because as I go through I'm going to overlap colors, and I want those cool colors to go last because they tend to ink very heavy. So I'm going to start with my pink, and I'm basically just going to be drawing small lines going from one line to the other. I'm going to fill in a lot of space, more than you would think. Going through here, it's going to feel like you do like a quarter of the space just in pink. And it doesn't really matter how thick they are. You could do one thin line, or you can do sections of thick lines. Doesn't really matter. And I'm just going through and I'm doing it in every section. Like I said, I'm filling up a lot more than like I would originally think was okay. Because when I tend to do this, I tend to underfill and have to go back in with my markers. But if I think, that's a little bit too much color, that tends to be actually the really good sweet spot for how much color I need to have in each of these sections. But that's me personally. You know, you do you. Figure out if you have enough color, or if you don't really like a color you're using, you can use less of it. Alright, so that's it for my pink. And all I did was just truly randomly go through and fill in a lot of areas. So next I'm going to take my dark pink. I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm just going to go through, fill in a lot of these sections. Do any kind of width you want, do anywhere you want. I usually buddy them up together, but you really don't have to. You can spread them out as far as you want. Another cool thing is because we're going from really light to dark for the most part, you can always overlap sections if you need to get all of that color in, or to create new designs. One thing I found doing this is that you definitely want to hit up those edges early on so that you can get good variables. Otherwise you end up putting the same color in all over the place at the end. So it looks like one big blue line or green line going down. Alright. So this in and of itself has created a pattern, right? We see that a pattern is done. You can definitely stop here if you don't want to color in anymore or use more colors. But like I said, I like my rainbows. So I'm going to be using a lot more colors, and I'm going to be leaving a lot less white space. I'm really filling in a lot of sections just because I like it when I have to figure out where to put my end colors so that they're a lot closer together and the design itself looks very, randomized and kind of too busy, because I think it creates a lot of fun coloration overall. Alright, so I've probably at this point used up more than half the space, and I've still got about 5 colors left to go. So here's my yellow. Now I'm moving on to my lime green. And now to my mint green. So I'm definitely starting to run out of spaces. And again, this is where I can start overlapping my colors a little bit. Alright, now I've got my aqua. Really filling in those spaces there. I've only got one more color left after this, so I am overlapping. Alright, my last color, my purple. So I'm going to go in, fill in the rest of my white areas. Alright, so you can see here all of my purple stuff. And I think that's everything. You can definitely leave white spaces in here if you want, but I really wanted this huge explosion of color, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. Very much what I wanted to see. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to my next square. I think I'm going to do the opposite one up here. So from here, I'm going to take a black Sharpie. You can use any color for this one, but it is going to be a one color section. And I have a little ruler here. You guys can use a little ruler if you want. I might just start with a little ruler and then go to freehanding. But I'm going to be doing a design that I always have trouble with, and I've done a couple times on here. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to start from one end. Well, first we're going to divide this up a little bit. So I'm going to make some rough lines, just kind of dividing up this section. So now I've got 4 sections here. I'm going to do it once more, create 6 sections, right? And at this point, because the sections are so small, I probably don't need my little ruler, but I am going to switch to a slightly smaller pen. Alright, so I've got my smaller pen. It's a huge downsize, it's tiny. But I'm going to start in one corner, and I'm going to draw a line going up to the edge of the other to make a triangle. Right? And now I'm going to start at this corner, go up to the other edge. And I'm just going to go around this entire section doing that. And as you get closer to the middle, you kind of start running out of space. So you get to the point where it looks like you might be reaching your last one, and it just crosses right over until it bisects that whole last section. So when you move on to your next one, you're going to do the opposite angle. So this one goes in that direction. So this one is going to go in the opposite angle, kind of mirroring. And then you're just going to do the same thing, starting in one corner, going up, and continuing onwards. And there we go with that one. So now I'm going to move to my next section over here, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'll look at the existing. I'm just going to do the opposite direction there. Alright, so you can see that the illusion is starting to form. It's not quite as hard. It's a little bit difficult to see the illusion because we use such a thick line to start it off with, but it's definitely there. You can see it kind of continues and creates that pattern. So as we build more, it's going to become more obvious. So I'm just going to move straight to the left here and fill in this section. So again, I'm starting with that opposite angle here. It gets a little weird with these very odd sections. Like over here, they're kind of like rectangles, just at angles. But with the more angles you put in, the more different it ends up looking. Alright, and now I've got a triangle piece up here, so I'm going to go in and do that one. Well, no. So I'm going to go back over to the right here and move my way over just to make sure that everything's going to work out fine. Because I will have two different angles to work with here. So I'm going to start here, take my opposite direction, move on over. You'll see here that this one has 5 walls, right? So I had 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 right here. So I am going to follow that one. Right, so this little wall is here. You can do this with as many walls as you want. You can start off with triangles and do this. You can start off with squares. It just makes the pattern look a little bit different. So just like the others, there comes a point when your section gets really small and you're just going to cross through to finish it. So here we can see how it's building in, and that's going on there. So that creates an interesting effect. Now for this last one here, I do have that little odd section that it started with, but I'm going to take from this section down here because that one represents the first line for this wall. So doing the opposite of this one, and then I'm going to go through and finish my section here. So very quick one. But that right there creates the illusion for this design. I love how, because it's almost symmetrical up here, where everything's kind of going according to plan, and then you get over here and everything kind of went in a different direction. It doesn't look bad, it just looks like a different kind of design, you know, like we entered a different section of the invisible paper. So I like how this one turned out. Alright. For this next one, I'm going to be switching back to my bigger marker. Okay. So I'm going to go to this far section here. Yeah. And for this one, I'm going to do vines. So I'm going to start in one corner of my section. I'm just going to draw a large curling line that ends in a slight curl. And I'm going to go from another area, do the same thing, and I'm making sure to leave space here because we are going to go in and add leaves in a minute. So, whoops, that one ended up a little closer than I like, but it works. And also when you run out of sections, or if you find really blank areas, you can just create a little side vine. And I don't want to crowd the area too much because I am going to go in with another color and do the same thing in a minute. So I usually start at the ends, and I take the ends and I kind of round it out a little bit, and then I add another section to it. This creates a heart shape just right on the end there to finish off all of these little vines right there. Right? And now when I go in and I make the leaves for the bottom here, I'm basically just going to draw a heart on top of the vine, and then I'm going to fill it in. So a heart on top of the vine. And I'm just being careful about where I place them so that they don't overlap or get too close to each other. And as you go up, you make the hearts a little bit smaller. Until you get to the end of the vine. I'm just going through and doing all of these leaves for all my vines. Little hearts, and then you fill them in. Never feel afraid to move your paper while you're Zentangling to get better angles or do anything like that, because this is about being mindful and taking a moment to relax. And if it's easier for you to move your paper to get things done, then that's what you need to do. Always pay attention to what's going on in your body, how you're feeling, how you're reacting. Are your shoulders tense? Does the design give you a lot of trouble to work with? Is it just not worth the effort that you're putting into it? Feel free to switch to other designs as we go through this, just to help with that. Alright, So I'm done with my black marker for this one. And you can see that it's kind of empty, and this is something that I never really liked about this design. So I started going in with a smaller marker. So I used a really thick one to do the basic design. Now I've got a smaller marker and it's green. And so I'm basically going to be doing the same design again. I'm going to roughly ignore the existing vines. I'm just going to go in and create new vines. I'm going to try and end their ends though in an open area so I can get that little heart shape going on at the end. But basically, I'm just overlapping the lines here. And I find it is easier to do these little green colored lines after we've done the black, just so that you know and see where it's going to work out a little bit better. You'll see that I end up having a lot more of the green vines than I do of the black vines. And again, that's just because they're a lot smaller. They can fit into these areas a little bit better. So now that I've got the basic vines done, I'm going to do the same thing for the green that I did for the black. I'm going to go through, draw hearts on the lines, and then I'm going to fill them in. You can kind of see here that I'm not really trying to make these hearts perfect. And I think that's just because they turn out a little bit better if they're kind of flat looking. And the more uneven they are, the more natural they look in a lot of senses. So that's why mine tend not to look like hearts. That and my markers bleed pretty bad, so they create kind of like that soft top. Alright, so there is my little vine section. So for this next section, let's see here. I'm going to start with my black marker. And I'm going to go up in this upper right hand area. what I'm going to do here is I've done a lot of the swirl designs before, but this one is going to be slightly different because when I create my swirl, right, I make a swirl, trying to keep the white space as even as possible as I go through here. But when I reach the end, I'm going to kind of just let it hang there. So I'm not going to go in and create an extra round all the time. I'm just going to start another swirl. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to go in and color in the background area. So I'm going to do my swirls. I'm going to do them pretty close as I usually do. But my hope is to be able to go in and color in all the extra areas that are left behind. Okay. So I created all my basic swirl designs, and again, they're not going into infinity and beyond. They're just kind of stopping. Now I'm going to take this light purple. It kind of looks like a baby blue in the light here, but it actually turns out to a light purple. I'm going to find all these little extra spaces, and I'm just going to fill them in. So I'm not filling in the swirl. I'm just filling in the extra spaces that it didn't cover. And there are spaces where the swirl kind of continues, or like the line stopped, but the white area continues. So like right here, you can see that it's technically connected. And I just draw, a subtle line there. And I fill in the area which are definitely not part of the swirl. Alright, so that finishes up that design. Now I'm going to go to the next square. It's great because these squares are like enclosed, so I don't, need to do anything particularly special to get stuff done. Alright, so for this next design here, I've got a big marker, and that's going to help. Honestly, with this one, to start off with, kind of the bigger the better, so I've got an extra big marker here, just in case. But what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be creating circles. And I mentioned this before, but when you create circles, there tends to be two kinds, right? The ones where the intent is to, or three kinds, I guess. The one where the intent is to just leave a line, the one where the intent is to fill in the circle, and the one where the intent is to fill in outside the circle. And they tend to have slightly different rules for each of them. If you're going to leave a complete line, you generally want your circle to be very pretty, no tails anywhere or anything like that. If you're going to leave, if you're going to fill in the circle, then you tend to want the outside border to be perfect. So there are no tails on the outside border, but you can leave tails on the inside. We're going to be filling in outside the circle. So our rule of thumb is we want the circle inside to be relatively very nice, right? So I want a nice clean surface inside the circle because all of this area out here is going to be filled in with black marker. So I'm just going to go through and draw some circles, trying to make the insides nice and smooth. And I do want complete circles for this, so like no half circles going off the page or anything like that, just whole circles. You can space them out as far apart as you want or as close together as you want. Right? So now I've got all my circles, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in all of this space between them. So I'm going to start with a larger marker and see if that works for me for coloring. If it doesn't, I'm going to go back to that medium-sized marker. The only reason I'm worried is because it's a chiseled tip. I'm really used to round tips. I'm just filling in all of this area outside here. So a lot of coloring with this one today. A lot of coloring. Fun part is that when you end up, you know, kind of overlapping or drawing on the circles or anything, because it's, you know, you're filling in the outside, you can always go in and correct it by just changing the border a little bit. So for example, this one, you know, it's kind of lopsided, so I can always go in there with my marker and just take away a little bit of that area to make it more even. That's pretty great. I love how clean the black markers make everything because they like take away, you know, over here I've got little pink edges and things like that. And black marker just eats it. So it tends to be a long process for this design. But if you like coloring in your Zentangles, this is definitely a nice one. Just because it takes time, it's a great way to focus. Yeah, think for a few minutes, color in all these edges that are going on. Alright, so there is basically the framework for the rest of the design. For that one, I'm going to go back to one of my smaller markers. And the finishing part of this design is that we're basically going to start at one area of our circle in the black, right? Put your pen down, and you're just going to go up and kind of make circular motions to create what looks like, a little flower or something inside here, little threads. And that is the finishing touch to this particular design. And you can even go with a smaller marker and do more. So again, you're starting at one section of your circle here. You're just going up and kind of doing looping lines or straight lines to kind of add a little color to create that design there. And while you can alternate which direction you're going to start these little areas from, it tends to be for this design that you usually start from the same area. So if you start, at this direction all over the place, then kind of be consistent with it. Otherwise, make sure that you're really random, so you're starting one from the top, from the side, from the bottom. But I kind of made myself a pattern here, kind of have to start from the bottom region. So I'm just going to go through and finish that way too. Hey, how you doing, Wanda? Alright. So there ends that section. Now I'm going to go on to my last section for the day. And I'm going to take out my ruler. Right, so, or straight edge. You don't actually need a ruler for this one, but they help. And so I guess it's time to decide how large I want them. I think I'm going to do 1/2-inch sections. So I'm just going to take my ruler, kind of line it up with my square here. My square is roughly 3 inches because we use that 3-inch sticky note to make it. And so I'm just going to go through here and draw little pencil lines in 1/2-inch segments. You don't have to be super exact about this. I like to be, but you don't have to be. And I'm just going to go to the other side of the square to make sure I get straight lines, doing 1/2-inch sections. Right? Now I'm going to do the same thing for the opposing walls. Oops. This is a 1/4 inch there. So now I've got all of my little sections. I'm just going to take my ruler, line up these little lines to create my lines going across. So again, you don't have to measure them out. Drawing straight parallel lines in even sections is probably not going to be too difficult in a square this size. But I like them being, really even, so I don't really have to think about it. And then I'm going to go through, do the opposite. And I'm just creating what's basically a grid pattern. This is all in pencil because I'm going to erase it later. Alright, so there's my basic grid section. Now I'm going to grab a darker colored marker. And the only reason I'm going to choose a darker colored marker is because when you overlap pen with pencil and then try and erase it, the pencil doesn't erase because you've trapped it underneath the existing alcohol marker or water marker. So I'm just going to grab a dark colored marker. You can use black if you want. I think I'm going to use a really dark red. I was going to use blue, but I really like these pinks and I wanted to bring them over. So I'm going to use a dark red marker, really dark red. Okay. Very dark red. You can't even see it that well. And what I'm going to do here is that in this section, I'm going to draw lines. So there's a couple ways you can do this. You can always do diagonal lines going in and across the section, but I'm going to do parallel lines going from one edge of the section to the other. And I'm just reaching from one wall, bringing it down. And that's how I'm going to create my parallel lines. And I am going to do a checkerboard pattern. So I'm going to skip a box, and then I'm going to fill in the next square with these parallel lines. Again, I skip that square. And then when I go to the next row here, I'm going to switch. So because I filled in this square, I'm not going to fill in the one beneath it. I'm going to fill in the one next to it. And that's what creates that checkerboard pattern. Skip on over. And I do try and get my lines as close to that pencil line as possible, just so that I can maintain the integrity of the square when I erase these pencil lines. And my lines are very close together, but you don't have to draw them this close together. They can be spread out. You can also choose to do something other than lines. If you wanted to do a checkerboard but didn't want to draw the lines, you could fill these with circles or scribbles. You could fill them with other shapes, or you could just color them in. Alright, so that finishes off the red for it, and you can definitely leave it this way and have it that as your final product, but I'm going to go in with a black marker and I'm going to do the opposite section to create a true black and red checkerboard. So with my black, I'm going to alternate the way the lines work so that I'm going in the opposite direction as my red lines. I do this just to create some visual space for it. Make it a little bit easier on the eyes to recognize what's going on. And because you filled in all of your red squares, all you have to do is fill in your black squares. So there's not a lot of demands for going from row to row the same way I usually do with my red. And I just do that. The reason I set it up that way, it's really easy to go through and do the incorrect square for the pattern. So following it through really logically helps prevent any kind of design errors that way. But because the black is just outlined, it's really easy to go in there and just fill in each of the squares. I love how rustic this design comes out looking. I've always been a fan of like old-fashioned pinstripes, so I appreciate the aesthetic that this creates. Alright. I really sped through that black, and it's just because I didn't have to worry about what squares I was filling in. A lot of that framework already existed, so I just went for it. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my eraser, and I'm just going to go through and clean up these sections so that we can see everything without the pencil lines. Alright, so there we have our finished Zentangle. And so that has been Zentangle with the HIR Wellness Institute. My name is Jo Mackenzie, and I hope to see you again next week, Saturday at 10 a.m. Have a wonderful day.